Hey everyone, it's Adam here from the Franchise Tag, and I am on the Dynasty Hotseat.
Yes, hello everybody, and welcome back once again to the Dynasty Hotseat, the only Dynasty show out there that is a certified inferno. And today, we're back. Brand new guest on the show. Absolutely love getting new guests on whenever we can. Be meaning to get Adam or one of these guys from the Franchise Tag UK podcast on. It's great to finally get a hold of one of you guys. Absolutely love the work that you do. Adam, welcome to the Dynasty Hotseat. How you doing, my friend?
Yeah, I'm good. Glad to be here. I know we tried to do it last summer, but I was awkward as always. But we've got one of us turned up, so we're here now.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, listen, if you don't already, make sure you are following Adam at AdamM_NFL over on Twitter or X or whatever the hell you want to call it. And of course, the Franchise Tag UK podcast, guys, are absolutely smashing it. So great to be chatting with Adam today about these 2024 rookies, right? This class is heating up real nice. It looks like we got a real couple of excellent prospects coming up. But Adam, before we dive into the actual mock draft, have you noticed any kind of generalizations about this class? Anything you're thinking this is an overview that I'm noticing about these 24 rookies?
Well, everyone's saying how amazing the QBs and wide receivers are and how bad the running backs are, isn't it? That's kind of the generalization, I think, for this one. I kind of feel a bit sorry for the running backs. I think it's more just that there's no Bijan. That's kind of all it is, isn't it, really? It's like, actually, when you look at them, they're not that bad. They're just not real top level, and I think that's the reason why. So I'm not so down on the running backs. Having said that, spoiler alert and all that, probably won't be very high, but even still, it's like they're a little bit better than what I think a lot of people do, and I think they're going to be decent for people's fantasy teams as well.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Adam, if this is part of an overall trend that we're seeing with the running back position in general, right? These guys aren't necessarily less talented than someone we've seen 4 or 5 years ago, but we all just are expecting them to go into a committee, right?
Yeah, I think your days of Saquon Barkley having everything, Austin Eckler having everything, I think they're probably gone to a certain extent. You're going to get the odd one or two. I think eventually Bijan probably will. I think there's a few others out there that will continue to, but when it comes to new ones, the way the NFL value it, I think you're going to see teams with two, maybe even three running backs. You look at how the Ravens are, and how many they use. I think it's just the way forward.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, with running backs, we haven't seen the draft yet. People are going to lose their mind. If the Ravens, for example, if Braylon Allen goes to the Ravens, people are going to lose their mind, right? Because it's this prototype guy, you think he's perfect there, and then we'll see them push up. But for now, yeah, I think you're spot on. I'm noticing them being pushed down towards the back end of the second round, right?
Yeah. I think wherever any of these, I think if you can get a running back, and there's a few decent ones. There's some that have done pretty well, but it's just like I say, they're not peak sort of Bijan from last year. That's the reason that everyone's so afraid of them. But then I also think it's because the wide receivers are so good as well. So it's kind of there's a real sort of gulf, and that's the issue why people have gone so badly against them.
Yeah, absolutely agree. So let's see where the chips fall, and we'll pull up our mock draft tool, of course, right after. Guys, this is YouTube. You know what everyone wants on YouTube. Adam wants it for his channel. I want it for my channel. Hit that like, hit that subscribe. We're going to get smashed right into this mock draft right after you do that. I'll wait for you. Come on. That's good. Thank you. So let's pull up the mock draft. Here we go. We got all the picks on here. Adam, what an absolute dream for you. You've got pick 1, you've got pick 2, 3, 4. You've got all the picks. Absolutely fantastic. So we're going to start all the way over here with pick 1-1. This is Superflex. We don't have a tight end premium here. Where are you going with the 1-1 in this Superflex draft?
So I think because it's the 1-1 and it is Superflex, I personally feel you have to go with the sort of like the positional value of the quarterback. It
Yeah.
just kind of feels like as great as Marvin Harrison has been at college, and he has been amazing, and he kind of feels like he is the main sort of like almost like the biggest prospect that's not a quarterback coming out of college for probably close to a decade. It really feels that much with him. Because you're playing Superflex, Caleb Williams is the guy that I'm going to go for first. I think he just he's a 3-year player. You know, in college, he's done everything. I know that this last year maybe wasn't quite as good as what people hoped for, but he lost a lot of talent around him this year. It's like it was harder for him. So yeah, I just feel like he's the one who can improvise the most. He scrambles the most. He's got a great rushing upside. There's another quarterback that doesn't get the sort of the kudos that he deserves for his rushing in this draft, and deserves it. But Caleb Williams is definitely the number one guy that you want to be going for.
Adam, what do you think of that? I've been saying this to a couple of people. I think Caleb Williams might be the first example of these like Mahomes clones that are coming out, right? You've seen it with Brady, all these pocket passers. Now we're seeing people, playing backyard football pretending to be Patrick Mahomes. Can you see that a little bit in Caleb Williams' game?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see the way that college football is trending. It is going that way. I mean, you've got Jaden Daniels this year. That is a similar kind of relying on his legs. I think it probably started with the likes of Cam Newton
Yeah.
and obviously last year Anthony Richardson. But you're also sort of starting to see not just the guys who are capable of using their legs and then the pocket passers. You're starting to see these guys who can do both. And I think that Patrick Mahomes has probably sort of shown that it's capable. And now you're starting to see people emulate that. And Caleb Williams is definitely the guy who's sort of like the most like him, I suppose, in that respect. I think because of that, because of the rushing upside, because of his ability that he has in the passing game as well, I think you'd be crazy not to be taking him at the 101.
Yeah, so Caleb locked in there. Absolutely no arguments for me at all at the 1-1. So who you going then at the 1-2? Obviously it is super flex, but a lot of people are kind of abandoning that quarterback strength and going with Marvin Harrison Jr. here because he is such a strong prospect. Is that where you're going, or are you sticking with quarterback?
Yeah, I have to say I've kind of gone the same as everyone else in that respect. I do feel that Marvin Harrison is just that much of a sort of stud wide receiver that you can. There's not many of them. You're not going to get many of
Yeah.
them. I mean, you basically got what Jefferson, Chase, Lamb, maybe Amon Ra, but I think that's probably about as far as you're going to go. I feel like Harrison is kind of maybe not his first year, but give it a couple of years, will be in that
Yeah.
position where he's going to be like a regular, especially if he goes where a lot of people are mocking him to go, which is Arizona. So I think that's going to be great for him as well. Marvin, I mean, he's got everything going for him. Big-bodied route runner, great route runner, separates for fun. Has great hands, great footwork. What more do you want? I mean, he's even one thing that I have seen where people have sort of knocked him a little bit is that sometimes he doesn't sort of fight through the contact that much. That's something that he has had a little bit of a knock against him. But everything that I've seen of his tape, he just looks like he wants to win every ball, and he is that good. And he's coming out of a college in Ohio State who are just renowned for wide receivers. So this guy is legit, and he hasn't even started yet. So I
Yeah.
mean, he is that good. So yeah, 102. I think as valuable as the quarterbacks are, this guy is going to be very valuable.
Yeah, it was really interesting as well. You look at all those guys, some of the guys you mentioned, like, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, even guys like CeeDee Lamb, the people that are right up the top of the dynasty charts for wide receivers, none of them were going at 102 in a super flex draft. They were all like maybe 4s, 5. Justin Jefferson was towards the back end of the first round. No one has got the hype that Marvin Harrison Jr. has. Maybe even you might have to go as far back as like a Calvin Johnson to see like someone who was being taken all the way up here, like, and even arguably at 1-1. So he just seems to me that, I know we don't really want to jinx anything, but he just seems like a a bulletproof prospect. And even if he doesn't go to Arizona, I don't particularly care, Adam. I actually don't mind where he goes. I think he's going to be fine.
Yeah, I think that he is one of these players who is just sort of it doesn't matter. It really, like you say, it doesn't matter where he goes. I think he's going to be capable in any team that he goes to. I mean, say the Bears go and do something a little bit sort of that we're not expecting, and they decide to stick with Justin Fields. Well, they're still going to be near the top of that draft. I mean, Harrison would be the ideal person. I mean, could you imagine having him and DJ Moore in the same? I mean, it's horrific for me. I'm a Packers fan, so I wouldn't want to see him. But it's like, it's one of them things where it's almost like you do have to question it sometimes, where you sort of think to yourself, well, actually, he might be worth going for. He might be the one you want. Because, as you say, everything that he has shown puts him so high in this draft and in any college, any NFL draft coming up. You just feel like he's a home run straight away.
Yeah, absolutely agreed with you there. So we got Caleb in, we got Marvin Harrison in. Who you going then at the 103? This is kind of where like the draft kind of starts for most people, right? Because everyone's kind of saying Marvin and Caleb, they're 1 and 2. Who have you got as your number 3 then?
So my number 3, I'm going to go for Drake May, out of North Carolina. I just feel like he kind of is a little bit more of a pocket passer, but he is incredibly underrated when it comes to his rushing ability. He really can rush a lot. He showed it not so much this year, but again, another quarterback who lost quite a few pieces in his team for his last year at North Carolina. But he's more than capable of rushing. Did a lot of it in 2022. I think he was the leading rusher for the team actually in 2022. And just is a really good quarterback from what we've seen. He's got great mechanics, really accurate. He's got the arm strength, so that's great. And obviously the fact that he does have the footwork and he can run as well is just a bonus in this one. The one thing that I've got down for him, he's ready to go. You know, that is the one thing with Drake May. And so I think if you want a quarterback that can slot into your team from day one, probably at Washington, who will need one, Drake May is a great option for you to have, certainly as a QB2 in your team.
Yeah, he just seems like the prototype, right? He's just kind of a guy that's built. I love that you mentioned that about the rushing upside as well. I think it's a friend of the show, Rich Cooling at Dynasty Island, tweeted that out today, that in 2022, he almost totaled 700 rushing yards and was the team's leading rusher. So he's definitely able to get that done. Kind of like a sneaky rushing upside. I always kind of make it akin to like a Justin Herbert. It's not an exact match, but it's kind of like he's a sneakily good athlete and he's big, right? You kind of don't really notice it until you see him standing next to other people. But this guy's like 6'4", I believe. Not sure what his official measurables will be, but he's a guy that I'm not really worried about. Can he take the hits or not? So I think that's a great pick with Drake.
Yeah. I mean, he's a big guy, isn't he? And that's all that's what you need. See, that's kind of the thing where it's like with these rushing quarterbacks, you need them to be big guys to be able to take the contact and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely agreed on that one. So we got May locked in at 3. Who's following up then at pick number 4?
So although it's Superflex, we're gonna go back to the wide receiver position on this one. I personally love Malik Neighbors. Think he's a great wide receiver. Has amazing speed. He can separate really well, which is that's the main thing. That's one thing you'll probably hear me say quite a few times. It's about the separation. Yeah, if you can separate from your defender, then you're gone. And with his speed, he is gone. You know, that's the thing. He's great in the slot. He's great on the outside. I don't know if you can cover this guy. I genuinely don't know. He's because he has that speed and he just has that quickness. But it's to start and to stop. You know, that's the other thing as well. It's not literally just it's not like he's gone and that's it. It's like he can stop incredibly quickly and then he can go again. And you just sort of think that he's going to be a nightmare for any defender to deal with. One thing I noticed, 43 of his 86 catches were all 15 yards or more in 2023. That's that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, that is ridiculous when you think about it. And so I know that obviously he wasn't going up against NFL caliber defenders all the time in 2023, but even still, he's not going up against slouches. You know, they're decent players, these guys, and he was able to do that. Yeah, just really good, great wide receiver, especially if you're like down here. I mean, I think that he would be the number one wide receiver in most years,
Yeah.
but because of Marvin Harrison, obviously not.
Yeah, and guys, kind of we mentioned earlier, like we talked about where were Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb and all these guys being taken? About 1-4. So this is usually where we see the first wide receiver come off the board. Just unfortunately for Malik Neighbors, he's got Marvin Harrison Jr. in the same class as him, but that's no knocking him at all. I think both these guys can come in and hit right away. And just like with Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm not really worried where Malik Neighbors ends up. In fact, it might be even better for him if he ends up someone that already has that set in stone alpha wide receiver, because then he's not getting double coverage right away. He's able to like settle into the NFL a bit better. So yeah, I'll love Malik Neighbors. Absolute lightning in a bottle. Just do you have a dream landing spot for him? Because I'm seeing him and seeing the Chargers. It seems like it could work.
Yeah, so the Chargers was kind of the one that I always went for. My thought process was always very much like, oh, he'd be great for the Chargers. But the thing with the Chargers is that I just kind of feel like now that Jim Harbaugh is there and you've just got Greg Roman gone in as well, OC, it doesn't really match for the way that I feel like they would want to play. I feel like they're going to be very running back heavy, very tight end heavy. I think there's another guy we might have in a few picks time who would be ideal for them and will probably be the one they go for. But yeah, I feel like just any team that really needs a bit of a speedster is going to be ideal, I think. But obviously he can do everything else as well, and that's the really good thing about Neighbors.
Yeah, I think he's absolutely quality. I can't wait to see where he ends up and what he's going to do in the next step of his career. So we got him locked in at 1-4. Where are you going next, Adam? At 1-5, nearly halfway through the first round.
Yeah, so for the 1-5, I'm going to go back to the quarterbacks as it is Superflex. I feel like Jaden Daniels is definitely the one that you want to be going for. There's a lot of talk about him going to sort of like in the top 3 of this year's draft. And I think if you're getting that sort of draft capital, you have to think that this guy's going to be a starter. He's going to be someone that you want straight away. He's got great mobility. That's his main game. He's actually got a fairly decent accurate deep ball as well. I feel a lot of people maybe don't look at the passing so much, but you know, he only played 12 games last year and got 50 touchdowns, so he can't be that bad when it comes to the passing game. But the mobility is really where he will get a lot of points for anyone in fantasy. He had over 1,200 rushing yards last year, so that's great as well. His biggest worry is his size. That really is the biggest problem with him. He's not Lamar. He's not Cam Newton or Anthony Richardson. It's not that kind of guy. And so he's going to have to be, I think, a little bit more clever with his rushing attempts than some of them, because he can't take the sort of hits that these guys can take and get away with it. So I think that's definitely, and it could be an issue for him. But considering he's, you know, he could be a starter from day one, I think you got to get him in at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we even see talking about like taking those hits. We've seen this year, even Anthony Richardson can't take those hits. And he's a giant guy. So if he can't take those hits, Jaden Daniels can. He's going to have to go and he's going to have to learn from people like Lamar Jackson, who sort of jumps up and elevates himself before he takes a hit. So he's not taking anything on his knees or his ankles. Pick up as many little tips as you can. He did quite well in college, I think, at getting down at the right time, but everything ramps up. The speed's so much higher at the NFL level. So I would hope for his sake that he goes somewhere that has a good coach that isn't, that is maybe going to show some slight restraint with him to start off with, get him kind of used to that level, get him passing a bit more. That would be the best path for him rather than just, let him go out and, do his thing and just you be you. Because I think that's maybe a dangerous route for him to take. Is that something you see as well?
Yeah, I think that I feel because of all of that, although because you're taking him at 105, it is quite high. But he is a bit of a gamble. I think you're just going to
Yeah,
have to sort of live with yourself as him being a bit of a gamble for your team.
yeah,
But yeah, it is a concern, obviously, that if he does take them hits, that he might not survive them very well, or he will
yeah,
struggle a bit injury wise. So that is a worry. But he's shown that he is more than capable as a passer. So I kind of
yeah,
just I hope he kind of like you say, whichever coach gets him, it's very much pass in first and use your legs as to get out of trouble kind of thing. And I think that would be better for him. But I don't know if he might lean on it a bit too much.
yeah. And is it? I'm not sure if it's controversial to say or not, Adam, but I actually believe if all of these players in this draft hit their ceiling, Jaden Daniels is standing at the top of that pile.
Yeah, I think potentially because of the rushing, I could see that would be the case. I mean, obviously because of Caleb, that would be
Yeah,
another guy who obviously can rush a lot. But yeah, I mean, if they all hit their ceiling, Jaden Daniels would be number two. I would have him as. So yeah, I think that he's definitely a sort of like a boom or bust. I think in this one.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely agree. But still a nice little punt at 1-5. So we'll move on to 1-6. And Adam, you're creating a lovely little, red and blue pattern here. You going to keep that up going wide receiver again, or what you thinking?
I'm not. I'm going to destroy the
Oh,
pattern, I'm
oh
afraid.
no.
We're going to go for a tight end. We're going to go for Brock Bowers out of
Yeah,
Georgia. I think that this is sort of he feels like the epitome of the new tight end that we're
hmm,
starting to see here. He's very athletic, kind of got that sort of yards after the catch ability that he has, and I also think he's very tough to bring down. That's the other thing with him.
mm,
Once he gets going, he can be quite tough. He's not quite as big as what a lot of the older tight ends were, but I feel like I say, this is kind of the new tight end, 6'4", 240. He's very sort of Dalton Kincaid. I feel
yeah,
like that kind of thing. Superb route runner. He's a great vertical threat as well. It's like he can do everything that you want him to do. And on top of that, he blocks well, even knowing that he's a little bit smaller than what some of the older tight ends are. I feel like the Chargers is an absolutely obvious place for him to go to.
yeah.
And I think anyone who needs a tight end and you're around the 1-6, then this is the guy that you want to be going for.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And this time last year, Adam, I was sort of much maligned for saying that the rookie tight ends not producing thing is starting to become a slight myth because of the way things have been trending. I think last year really showed people that that's becoming a thing of the past, and rookie tight ends can come in and produce right away. So, what do you say to the people who are saying, "Oh, I don't want to take a tight end here because it'll take him 3 years to produce anyway"?
Sam Laporta.
Yeah, correct.
I I think that is it. That is what you're saying. I mean, Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid, Trey McBride has only done 1 year
Yeah,
where he was quiet, and then he sort of he picked up and did pretty well last year. I think them days are over. These guys are just sort of they kind of feel like souped up wide receivers to a certain
yeah,
extent. They're not, the old style tight ends anymore. And I think because they're being played in a slightly different way as well, you're starting to see that they're being used a lot more, a lot quicker. Yeah, I think the Bowers, like I say, he's the epitome of it. He's shown nothing but great sort of production in 3 years at Georgia. I I wouldn't be put off by him at all at the 1-6. I don't think I'd want to go too much higher just
yeah.
because it's tight end. But I just feel like when you're in the middle of the first round, I feel like he's worth a go. And I don't see it going badly for you.
Yeah, exactly. That's sort of what I was trying to say last year about people like Dalton Kincaid and Sam Laporta. I was trying to get people to visualize in their mind. It's like, imagine that orangey yellow is actually blue for wide receiver, because that's
Yeah.
really what they're going to be doing. They're coming in as pass catchers. They're not going to be blocking too much. Although Brock Bowers can also block because he's a freak. Like, yeah, get into that mindset of these are pass catchers coming in. And if they were registered as a wide receiver, where would I take them? So I think that's a good
Yeah.
mindset to get into for these guys. But we got Bowers locked in at 6, which is great value, I think. So now moving on past the halfway point of the first round, we're at 1-7. Who are you going with?
So we're going back to wide receiver. I think we're going to have quite a few wide receivers coming off now. But Romar Morris is the one I'm going to go for out of Washington.
Yep.
I think he's been kind of a little bit. I feel like he's been a little bit underrated because of Harrison and Neighbors, but he is someone he's a very explosive wide receiver. He's a great red zone target. I mean, he's 6'3", and he's got, I think he's 215, 220, something like that. He's a decent sized wide receiver, and kind of like when you think about what you were just saying about Bowers, where it's not that far off, weight wise and height wise. So it's like that's kind of what you want. He sort of reminds me of T. Higgins a little bit. He kind of has that sort of thing about him, or like a slightly bigger version of Chris Olave, I suppose. That's the kind of comp I'd give for him. Really good with the contested catches. That's kind of where he really makes his money. The concern with him is that he didn't really do much for a few years, but he had a really, really good 2023. So it kind of feels like it is only 1 year of really good production. But he, like I say, he did very well. The whole Washington team did pretty well, and that's probably why it's happened in this year for him. But you put him in a team with a decent quarterback, and I think that you'll probably find he does pretty well. I think he's the number 3 wide receiver that you want to be going for. Like I say, I think he's a bit underrated because of the other two. But at 107, this is, it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's punt time, but I do feel like to be getting a wide receiver of this potential quality at that spot is exactly what you want.
Yeah, I'm right there with you with Romar Morris. He's locked in as my third wide receiver coming off the board as well. What I kind of looked into that because a couple of people sort of said that about his late declare and not kind of producing that early. Sort of found out he used to be a completely different build. He used to kind of be this weird, slender, kind of lanky guy, and he went into the weight room and just packed on the muscle. Had a pretty, good or at least a rejuvenated year in 2022, and then obviously lit the world on fire in 2023. So that's a plus in my book. This is a guy that knew he wasn't cutting it, he knew he wasn't good enough, and he went out there and he made changes. So that's kind of like a weird tick in my box. Like, even though it's a negative for a lot of people that he was a late declare, I like that he didn't accept the level he was at, and he went out and he made changes at such a young age. I think it's a good sign of character from Romar Morris, I think.
Yeah, I think sometimes people just want everyone to be a robot and it's all exactly the same all the way through their college career, and it doesn't happen. That's not how it works. Sometimes they're not the right size at that point and they haven't grown enough at that particular stage in their life and stuff like that. So I do wonder if that's a little bit like that's all it is. Like you say, he realized that he needed to put on more weight and he went and did it, and you had a great last year. I mean, what more can you want from him out of 2023? And so, I think he's someone that you want to be going for.
Yeah, all those people saying Romar Morris is the next Quentin Johnson. He doesn't have holes in his hands, all right? So let's lay off that, please. So let's move on from 7 and move on to pick number 8, right after Romar Morris. Now, Adam, I don't know about what for you. This is like a bit of a tier break for me after the 1-7. This is where more question marks start to pop up. Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, I think that is kind of what happens. You've got your 3 quarterbacks, you've had your 3 wide receivers, and your super tight end, and then it's just a little bit. It's not a complete cliff down, but it is sort of dropping down quite a bit. For the 108, I'm going to go for Troy Franklin out of Oregon. Like Franklin, think that he had a great season there. Really good hands, lots of speed in him, very explosive. Again, another guy that creates loads of separation, really does all the time. Biggest concern, he's a little bit small. He's only 187 pounds, but he can create the separation. And we're starting to see now, like, you look at players like Devonta Smith. He hasn't done bad for you in your fantasy team. And if you're at the 108, I feel like if you're getting that, you should be pretty happy. So I know he's a bit smaller, but I do think that he was very good. PFF had him at a similar grade to Marvin Harrison, so for
Wow.
2023. So, you know, I mean, you kind of you look at that, and I know that Harrison had a dip because his quarterback wasn't great. Um, but and obviously Franklin had a really good season. But you do just sort of think to yourself, he has the potential to really kick on. So yeah, really like Troy Franklin. Think that a lot of people are probably a little bit low on him because of that. But yeah, he's explosive receiver, creates a separation. What more could you want?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I've got Franklin here as my fourth wide receiver as well. Just love the way, like you're right, he gets open, and I know I'm knocking him as being like he kind of runs the same routes a lot of the time, but if it ain't broke, like why fix it? Like he's getting open on these routes all the time, so why would he change?
Yeah, I think the other thing is that with Oregon, it was kind of done in a certain way. That's kind of the knock on Bo Nix, isn't it? It's the same
Yeah,
sort of thing where it's a little bit like, oh, well, he only did short passes, and there wasn't a lot of sort of different things that he was being made to do. You can only judge them based on what they've done, and if they haven't done anything wrong, it's a bit difficult to have a go at them for it, sort of thing. So I think that Franklin has, although maybe some of his routes that he's run have been limited, I just feel like he's done them very well, and any coach should see what he's best at and sort of adapt to
yeah.
that to a certain extent if you want him to be like one of your main weapons. So yeah, I think because of that you can't really hold it against him too much.
Yeah, and whenever you see, like, if I watch quite a lot of Oregon this year, and whenever you do see him, like every now and again he'll line up in the slot, every now and again he'll have like a dig route or something a little bit different. He can do it. Like, there's
Yeah.
absolutely no doubt in my mind. He's such a freak athlete, and he turns on a dime as well. So I think no matter what system he goes into, he's just such a good athlete that he should settle in absolutely fine. So yeah, I love Troy Franklin at pick number 8. Who's right after him then at pick 9? Are you sticking with a wide receiver well, or are you dipping back into another position?
I am sticking with the wide receivers. It's kind of pretty much a bit of a carbon copy, to be honest. Brian Thomas, very again a similar guy, great separation and great long speed, a bit like Troy Franklin. Thomas is really good in single coverage. I noticed. I has long body, long arms. Really helps him when it comes to contested catches. He can do that as well. He's 6'4", 205 pounds. So he's a decent size for a wide receiver. He obviously had Malik Neighbors on the team, so you can
Yeah.
kind of argue that it might have taken some of the defenders away on to Neighbors rather than him, and vice versa. But I just think that he's one of these guys who he's more than capable. You've seen everything that you need to see from him. He's a very capable wide receiver. Biggest concern with him, couple of things. First of all, he's only really had the 1 year production, so that is a little bit of a concern, like some of the others. And the other thing is, I said great separation. When it's underneath, when it's coming back, he's not quite as good. He doesn't have that thing that Neighbors does, where
Mhm.
Neighbors is like go, stop, go, and it's like they can't keep up with him. Thomas, maybe it's when he goes and he comes back, he kind of like he doesn't have that speed that Neighbors has. But then that's why he's at the 109 and not at the 104. So, this is the thing. But again, a really good wide receiver that I feel like you want to be looking at.
Do you know what? I can almost see this is going to happen after the combine because they are kind of spookily similar.
Yeah.
Brian Thomas and Marvin Harrison Jr. have almost the exact same measurables. Like in every department you look, like height, weight, like arm length, reach, almost exactly the same. I'm wondering if they have similar results in the combine, will we see Brian Thomas rocket up some boards? Because they're like, he's a Marvin Harrison Jr. clone. It's like, but he doesn't quite have those intangibles that Marvin has. Doesn't have the smarts that Marvin has, I don't think.
Yeah, I think you've got probably a good chance. I don't know if Harrison will necessarily measure out the combine as the top of the top with everything. I think he'll
Yeah.
probably just be an incredibly good all-round guy, which is what he is. You're going to have guys that are quicker than him. You're going to have guys
Yeah.
that can jump higher than him and stuff like that. Yeah, I feel like Thomas, you might see that he might be able to run a bit quicker than him. and then all of a sudden everyone goes, well, hang on a minute, like you say, he's the same height, the same weight, he kind of looks similar in the way that he plays in that respect. And so yeah, it does feel like that. But yeah, I mean, I think he probably will go a bit higher than this, but he's, if you can get him at the 109, then happy days.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of shows you how talented this class is. Or a guy like that,
Oh,
everyone we think previously would be pushed up, but love it if you're at 109, you're getting a player like Brian Thomas for sure. So we got 3 picks left of the first round, Adam. So where are you going with your first one?
so 110, we're going to stick with wide receiver. Xavier Worthy is where I'm going to go for the 110. Now, he's not. I'm not a massive fan of sort of the tiny guys, although I've got Tank Dell on one of my teams, so forget about that. But the thing that you have to understand with Worthy is that although he is small, it doesn't matter because it does work. We're seeing it with Tank Dale that
Yeah.
it works with, we're seeing it with the likes of Devonta Smith that it does work. I mean, Devonta Smith's a bit bigger than this guy, but Worthy is 6'1", so he's not like tiny as in short. He's just sort of like slender.
Yeah.
But he has got amazing speed. I mean, you talk about like measurables and stuff like that. He will probably be one of the quickest in the combine. He's got amazing speed. He's elite when it comes to separating, and again, that's what you want. He gets off the press really well. That's something that I've noticed when he's done it. And also, I've said a couple of times about some other guys maybe only doing it for 1 year. This guy's a bit more of a consistent performer. I think he's year 2 and year 3 for him were pretty good. He wasn't at the top of anything, so he's not like real top, but that's why he's at the 110. The only issue, like I said, size. That's the biggest concern when it comes to him. But, I mean, a lot of this is going to become draft capital as to where they go. If this guy sneaks in the first round, you want him.
Yeah. Yeah, he's somebody who come out and produced as a freshman as well, which is really good because the players he's playing against are now pretty much all in the NFL because he was going up against some pretty good competition there as well. So we know that he can produce against high-end talent. He's someone that, you're right, separation, that is the thing I look for the most in any wide receiver. The speed thing, I'm not too fussed on how fast someone is. Like, I kind of looked into the numbers on the 40-yard dash at the combine, and is there any correlation between how fast you run and how well you do in fantasy? There's a negative correlation, Adam. The faster you run in the 40, actually, the worse you perform in the fantasy football, which is absolutely crazy. But this is what happens to players like John Ross. They get pushed up and they end up being busts, right? So I don't really mind too much about the speed, but for Worthy, it's that separation. And it's the same with all these guys up here, right? Troy Franklin, the separation. That's what you're looking for. Harrison, the separation. So that's kind of where my head is at now when I'm looking at any wide receiver prospects. So Worthy definitely checks that box. And yeah, if he gets first round draft capital, then you know that someone's going to use him. So I'm excited about Xavier Worthy. I wish Texas used him a bit more though last year. Did you feel like they were a bit, him and Adonai Mitchell, I was like, where are they? Like, what's going on? I didn't quite know what was going on at Texas.
No, they like to run the ball a lot, don't they, in Texas? That's I think that's the biggest issue.
Yeah, they do. But hopefully we'll see more of Xavier in the NFL
Yeah.
next year. So he's locked in at pick 10. Who you got then at your penultimate pick for the first round?
So 111, we're going to go for another wide receiver. I must admit, I'm not overly fussed on this guy, but I feel like there is just the potential there that something could happen, and that's Keon Coleman out of Florida State. I feel like he's kind of a contested catches kind of guy. It's sort of like, big-bodied wide receiver, again, 6'4", 215. He is explosive. He does have contested catches. Really good in the straight line. That's one that so it's kind of almost a bit basic sort of stuff, but the potential is there to do something. I feel like he wants the physicality. I think he wants to go up against the corners and really go into them and stuff like that, because that's where he excels. He does have some major issues, I would say. We've been saying about how important separation is. That's something that he's not really. I feel like he wants to fight rather than to separate. And so there is that issue. His agility is not like these other guys, and his route running is again not like these other guys, but he is a bit bigger and got a bit more weight on him, so that's probably why. He kind of has that sort of DK Metcalf type look about him, and it really depends on whether or not he's going to be able to translate it to the NFL and be able to be that guy. That's the concern. At the 111, obviously, you are now sort of punting on these wide receivers once the main guys have gone. So I think that he is worth picking at this point. I think he is worth a first round pick. But I do think there are concerns over Coleman.
Yeah, I get similar vibes from Coleman, and you might be able to speak to this better, Adam, as a Packers fan, but he's given me a bit of like Christian Watson kind of attitude about like there's so many questions, but you're like, it's all there. Like I could see it all there. He's a freak athlete, but he just needs to put all the pieces in the right place, right?
Yeah, I think with Watson, it's kind of probably more that he just needs to stay fit, to be honest.
Well,
I think
yeah.
if he could stay fit and actually have a run in the team, that would help. But I do get what you mean by it's like, I feel like he hasn't quite matched his potential yet in the NFL.
Yeah.
And I feel like Coleman is going to be one that could be similar. It might be one that he could hit, he could get the right coach, it could be great, and you've got yourself a wide receiver too easily.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It could not. So that's
Yeah.
kind of the problem with him.
Which is like not a huge knock on him as well. This is what 111 is. Like that is the swing for it at this stage, right? You may as well swing for it with a guy like Keon Coleman at 111. Earlier in the year when I was doing these mock drafts, I had sort of a bit of issue with Coleman because he was going at 1.6, at 1.7. I've no issue with him at 111. I think that is about right. He'll probably be around here, start of the second round after all is said and done. So yeah, I love that pick at 111. Who's your final pick of the first round then, Adam, at 112?
So my final pick, and I'm going to there's going to be like a little prefix for this one. Okay. He needs to be drafted in the first round if you're going to take him here. Michael Penix out of Washington. Yes. I think that Penix is, although he's a bit older, a lot of people are going to come out and say that he's been in the college game for a long, long time. He's still a very good quarterback. He was very good this year. Very accurate, got great ball velocity. And also the other thing I noticed about him, the anticipation to move. Like he doesn't run, but he knows when to move, where to move to. And if he does need to get out the pocket, he can step up. But the rushing is very limited. It's not really something he does. Obviously, injury issues he's had, but over the last 2 years, he's been pretty good. He's been pretty steady with that, and he hasn't had many injuries. I think in a Superflex around this time, he's worth a punt if he gets drafted in the first round.
Yeah, that's so important for these quarterbacks, right? And is Michael Penix better than some of the quarterbacks starting in the NFL right now? Absolutely. Like some of these guys are terrible, but it's just where is he going to end up? What kind of landing spot is he going to get? And yeah, if he's sitting behind a really impressive offensive line like he had at Washington and he has a bit more time, I love that for Michael Penix. If he ends up somewhere where he's having to scramble around, that's a bad time for old Mike there, right?
Yeah, I mean that is what it is. He needs to have. He is kind of almost like needs to go into the right situation in order for it to work. But he's more than capable, and I think that he's definitely one that you like I say. If he gets first round, I mean, there's a lot of teams. You know, the Saints, the Raiders, all these guys are looking at Vikings. They're looking at potential quarterbacks. If he can get in one of them that's got a solid O-line, then yeah, definitely worth going for.
Yeah, absolutely. So that brings us to the end of round one. Adam, we got a wee bit of time left. How about this for round two? Why don't you rattle off sort of 3 names at a time, and then I'll pick a name and we'll chat about them. So do you wanna fire us off at the 2-1 position? Maybe give me 2-1, 2-2, and 2-3 in a row if you can.
So 2-1, I've got Braylon Allen, running back out of Wisconsin. I just think that he's such a big bodied running back, 245 pounds. For me, I think he should be the first running back because of that. He's the only one that I really feel is the potential 3-down workhorse That out of all of them, that he's the one. 202, Jonathan Brooks, coming out of Texas. I know he's had the ACL injury. Obviously, that's the concern with him, but he's got great burst, great yards after the catch, good in the receiving game as well. He kind of reminds me a bit of Aaron Jones. He kind of has that feel a little bit to him, Jonathan Brooks. So really like him. And then 203, Adonai Mitchell, also out of Texas. I think his route running is what is the most impressive about that. He's got agility. The only thing with Mitchell, I feel like his production has never really quite been there. That's what's strange. It's like in order to get him up higher into say like this draft, but he's still a really good wide receiver and one that you want to get in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sort of the same question marks with Mitchell that we had with Worthy. It's like, oh, come on, Texas, like throw up. Well, I suppose that's why Jonathan Brooks is so high up, though, because he looked great. And I would go as far to say, I think if he didn't get that injury and he was fully healthy the whole way through, he could be someone that maybe even snuck into that first round. But he has an ACL injury. But let's be honest, Adam, what running back doesn't have an ACL? Well, Tajay doesn't have an ACL for it to get injured. Apart from him, all these guys have had ACL injuries. I'm not too worried about it, to be honest. As long as he's fit and healthy to go for game week 1, which I think he will be, I think it's okay for Jonathan Brooks. Do you think?
Yeah. I think he's going to be fine. And you've got to bear in mind that it's coming from as we said, with Texas, and this is kind of why Mitchell's production hasn't really been sort of like elite. They love running the ball. They've had Bijan, they've had Roschon, and now they've got this guy. And next year they've got another great one coming out as well. And it's like, that in the same way, if you look at like Ohio State and wide receivers, you want to look at these guys and running backs, and so take them. I mean, they're all good. So Jonathan Brooks, the injury is a concern, but as you say, which running back doesn't have these kind of injuries? And they all produce. So I think that Brooks will be fine. It's really, when it comes to the running backs this year, I think a lot of it is going to be based on where they get drafted and what their situation is.
Do they have Bijan's little brother over there at Texas? I've seen they had a running back called Robinson who was wearing like number 7. I was like, is that his little brother? I'm not actually sure.
Don't know. Possibly. You never know. I mean, they find all the good ones. So
yeah, exactly. It could well be him. We got both these. As long as he doesn't go to the Steelers with Arthur Smith there, he'll be fine, right? So I love those 3 picks. All right, let's fire on then with pick 2, 4, 2, 5, and 2, 6. Who are you going with?
So we've got a couple of quarterbacks as it is Superflex. Kind of feel like you want to get them in. A couple of guys. Bo Nix is my first one. I'm going to go for the 204. Quarterback out of Oregon. Again, a lot of this is going to depend on first round, whether they get drafted in the first round. They could well do with Bo Nix, could well do with the other one as well. He's accurate, good decision maker, anticipates it well. Obviously, the concern is the sort of limited playbook. So if he did come into the NFL, whether he would be able to do everything. But then if he wasn't asked to do it, you can't really have a go at him for not being able to do it like we said with the others. So, really like the look of Bo Nix. And then 205, we're going to go for JJ McCarthy as well. Again, a similar story, actually. Doesn't really, get a lot of running in that game. Michigan ran the ball an awful lot. But he did everything that he was asked to do. And he did it pretty well as well. Great ball security, good arm, very efficient, but he didn't produce much. But I feel like both of these guys, I think you got to look at them as though they're kind of in a super flex. They're almost like your QB4 kind of thing. It's like, and that's probably the best way to look at them as for that. And then for 206, I've gone for Trey Benson out of Florida State, another running back. Again, great power and balance. Long speed is brilliant. He's got the size as well. Not quite sort of like Braylon Allen size, but still big enough in order to be able to do everything he needs to do. Biggest issue with him is that from what I've seen, he's not much of a receiving back, but again, hasn't been asked to do it. So I think that he'll be decent in the NFL as well.
Yeah, I think Benson's the kind of guy who's I watched quite a bit of Florida State as well, and he didn't get used a ton in the receiving game, but you never really know what these schemes are going to be like. It's almost just like, can he do it? I think, yeah, he can. So if he's asked to do it in the NFL, I think he will be able to. JJ McCarthy, I've got this nagging feeling in the back of my mind. I'm like, that I think I'm too low on JJ McCarthy. I think I need to go back and watch some more tape on him because I just have a feeling it's like he might be a guy that goes surprisingly high in the NFL draft, higher than people think.
Yeah, I think McCarthy, probably due to winning the whole thing,
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like that kind of almost is a tick in his box, which a lot of other people won't have, obviously. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about McCarthy being a first round quarterback. I
Yeah.
can kind of see all 6 of these potentially being first round quarterbacks. It really depends how much that the teams decide that they want to gamble on some of these guys at the end. But yeah, I mean, the biggest issue with McCarthy is that he just didn't have a lot to do, and
Yeah.
that really is the biggest issue. I mean, in such a run heavy team, it's tough to be able to sort of say whether or not he's going to be amazing if given, the opportunity to do more. But at the same time, if they just use him in the same way, then he's probably going to be pretty okay. But I just don't think that he's going to be fantastic for fantasy.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's probably right. I'm gonna go back and check just in case. I don't know why. I just can't get it out of my head. Like I just think about like doing the dishes, like just walking about the house. I'm like, maybe I'm too low. And like, yeah, it's like I think my partner thinks I'm going crazy, but it's okay. So let's crack on then. Let's go to 2-7, 2-8, and 2-9. Where are you going with these, Adam?
So 2-7, we're going to go tight end. Jatavian Sanders, we're going to take it to
Love
207.
it.
I really like the look of him. I actually think he'd be getting a lot more hype if it wasn't for Brock Bowers, actually. I think he'd be doing a lot
Yeah,
more. Very, very athletic, great for yards after the catch. Not the greatest blocker, but I do feel like if you need a tight end who could potentially do something for you, then he's definitely worth going for. 208, Blake Corum out of Michigan. As we said, they were very run heavy, and he did everything that he needed to do. He's got great vision. I think he's pretty well built. Although he's only 5'8", he's
yeah,
213 pounds, so he's a big unit for someone who's 5'8". Brilliant production. That's probably actually in a way the great production that he had is kind of a negative as well because it means he's been used quite a lot. So
yeah.
that's the real concern for him. And also, I don't think he's got top long speed. I don't think he's that
Mm,
kind of guy. I think he's probably more the guy to have sort of within the 5 to the goal line.
yeah,
Reminds me of David Montgomery a little bit, but that's
yeah,
how I kind of feel like him, that sort of thing. 209, Bucky Irving at Oregon. He reminds me kind of Devon Chan. That's who he reminds me of. He's kind of got
yeah,
that sort of that speed, that burst. I feel like he's quite elusive. He kind of like can sneak in between as well. Great in the receiving game, but obviously he is a little bit small. But if you like a Chan, then this guy
yeah,
is the guy that you want. So I think he will do pretty well. And then at the 210, I'm going to go for Lad McConkey
nice.
out of Georgia. So I just think he's very athletic and a good route runner who's got agility. The thing with McConkey is that I don't think he's going to be amazing at anything, but I think he's going to be solid at pretty much everything. So he kind of feels like, if you want a wide receiver 4 or a flex position, that kind of thing, I think that's who you want on your bench to bring in. I think he would be ideal, but I don't think he's going to be elite at anything.
So McConkey is a real interesting one because after his Senior Bowl performances, there's been, I would maybe say, an overcorrection to his draft capital and how well people think he's going to do. I think he's exceptional. He might be the best route runner in the entire class, and I genuinely mean that. He is elite route running, but he doesn't necessarily have that high end speed that you need for the yards after the catch. I think he will separate well, but then I think he might end up going down immediately after.
Yeah.
I've seen him mocked as high as 110, where you're seeing your worthies are going. I think that's far too rich for me.
Yeah, that feels very high for him. Like I said, I think if you can get him in the back of the second round, then I think he's just a solid option. to have, which is kind of what I think sometimes you need. I think it really depends on the makeup of your team. If you need guys for upside, then I wouldn't say that he's what you need. If you need someone who's going to be steady and just provide you with a certain amount of points every week, then I think he'll be ideal to have. So yeah, it's not someone who's gonna, like I say, I don't think he's gonna be elite at anything, but I think he's gonna be decent, and that's kind of all you can ask for, really.
Yeah, and just very quickly on Blake Corum as well. What happens to his draft capital in terms of your rookie drafts for this? If he reunites with Jim Harbaugh and goes to the Chargers, what happens then? Yeah.
He's going up. Yeah, I mean, you have to think that Eckler's time at the Chargers is coming to an end, and unfortunately I think that he's probably not going to be producing much for fantasy much longer. So I know there's a lot of talk about Saquon Barkley. That's the rumor, isn't it, that they want Barkley, which would make sense because he is capable of being a 3-down back, so that would make sense for what they want to do. But yeah, I mean, if Corum went there under the coach that basically won the title in college, I mean, it feels like he would probably become the number one running back in this class, I would have thought.
Yeah, I would think so as well. So we got 2 more picks left, Adam. Who are you going with to round out this draft in the second round?
So 211, I'm going to go for Jalen Polk out of Washington. I think he's a great route runner, got really good hands. Another one who can create separation really well. And he's kind of a contested catches kind of guy as well. Again, to me, I feel like he's a bit like McConkey. He's not going to be elite at anything, but I think he's going to be solid at everything. So if you want him as like that wide receiver 4 or 5, then I think it'd be great. And then my final guy, a bit of a one for me. This one, as it's the final one, I've thrown him up higher than what he should be. Really, he should probably be the middle of the third. Ray Davis, Kentucky running back.
Yes,
Is who I'm going to go for. Firstly, great story. Guy who came out of foster care and has made it all this way, and he had a really good Senior Bowl as well, which was great to hear. Serious yards after the catch, this guy. He's good in the receiving game as well, but he's really good at that. He's got great vision and balance. He's going to be 23 in his first year, so he's going to be a little bit older than some of these other running backs. And Kentucky had a really good O-line. So again, you probably want him to be in that particular sort of situation as well. But yeah, you want it for the story. And also I think that he's a solid running back. I think he could do something in fantasy for people, but I don't think he's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, it's really interesting, this running back class. Like, I like so many of these guys because they're all these unpolished guys, and you're like, if you squint, you're like, oh, he could do this, he could do that. Like, there are plenty of people like Ray Davis. There's about 5 or 6 other guys still on the board where you're like, oh, actually, if they ended up in the right landing spot, we just look at some of the names like Will Shipley, Audric Estime. Like, if he ends up in the right spot, he could do absolute damage as well. Like, people like, I mean, Isaiah Davis is there, Jarquez Hunter. There's so many of these people left where you're like, oh, actually, this could work for them, but they're all those unpolished guys like a Ray Davis. But yeah, there's plenty of running backs to go around in the second and third round. But my advice I've been giving to people, Adam, is if you really need a running back, you need to go out now and start buying some veterans, because I don't think you can really bet on these running backs to help your team out too much right away.
Yeah, so these guys, as I've said, these guys are kind of punts. It really is about, I would say, if you have the ability to do it, if you have the draft capital as well, or players that you want to move on, then I would be probably going out there going for Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, these kind of guys. They're the one. I mean, if you've got loads of draft capital, then go for the big ones. Go for your like Kyron Williams and stuff like that. But I do feel like, you could probably do like a second round pick and a player for Josh Jacobs. You could do something like that. And he's still 25, 26, I think, Jacobs, around that age.
Yeah, he's younger than you'd think, right?
Yeah. So it's like these are the sort of guys that I think you probably do need to go for. Barkley, I think, is going to be, he's a free agent. You don't know where he's going to go. Go out there and give it a go now. This is the thing. If you're playing Dynasty and you're in a Superflex, you need a running back. Go for it now before free agency hits, because you might be able to get someone on the cheap. It might not work, but if you're talking about giving up a second round pick and a player that you don't really use, well, as we've said with these running backs, they're not fantastic. I mean, I think that a few of them will do well, but I just don't think any of them are gonna be the top of the top. It's just not gonna happen this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And Adam, before we let you go, I always ask all my guests, is there any player who you're like, you know what, this is my 4th-round punt, this is my absolute sleeper, this is someone who I'm just going to go for and take a couple of shares just in case? Is there someone to you that really stands out as your complete sort of sleeper pick that you don't hear too many people talking about?
I suppose normally I say Ray Davis.
Oh yeah,
So
sorry, yeah, you did push him up.
No, there isn't really anyone that I think. I mean, there's a couple of receivers. There's is it Cooley? I think is a receiver that a lot of people. Yeah, he's one that looks pretty good, and he would definitely be worth going for. I do the draft show with Andrew. We talk about the draft stuff and do all of that. I'd be remiss if I didn't come out and say Joe Milton, a quarterback. He's obsessed. He thinks he's really good. Yeah.
That's an interesting take.
So I mean, if you want a real punt at quarterback, then go for Joe Milton. But I mean, Spencer Rattler again had a really good Senior Bowl, didn't he? And again, if you want another punt, I mean, I don't see either of these guys going anywhere other than the 4th round, if at all. So, I mean, there's a couple of guys that would be worth looking at. And another one, Roman Wilson. He was the other one, the wide receiver who looked pretty good in the Senior Bowl. He could be one that's worth going for as well. So, yeah, there are a few guys that are worth it. I feel like this year it's very much the top 7, and then it's all a bit of a punt.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on there. And my guy, quarterback as well. There are a couple of sneaky quarterbacks. Jordan Travis, right, was in the running for the Heisman before his injury. He might go undrafted. I've been hearing rumors about him. Like, that's crazy to me. So he might be someone you might be able to pick up even after your draft is finished and there's free agents. You might be able to pick him up there and just stick him on your taxi squad and see what happens. He's a sleeper I'm keeping my eye on. But Adam, that brings us to the end of our mock draft. Just want to say thank you again so much for coming on. Do you want to remind the listeners, where can they find your work online?
Well, you can see my Twitter handle is right there. But other than that, go to the franchise tag for all the stuff that we do there as well. We've got draft stuff that's coming out all the time. We're doing the mock shows where we go through and review all the professionals mocks and stuff like that. So we're doing that. The Super Bowl show preview came out yesterday, so we did that as well. And so we're on all the socials. Go over to our YouTube page and subscribe and all of that stuff. So
yeah, absolutely. Right after you've subscribed, right here on the Dynasty Hotseat as well. Hit that like button too. That'll be absolutely perfect. So, Adam, mate, thank you once again for popping on. Thanks again to everybody at home listening too. And remember, for anything Dynasty you need to know, keep it locked on the Certified Inferno. And we'll see you next time.